In 2005, South Park released an episode that took aim at the world's most powerful cult, Scientology. This episode triggered an investigation by Scientology's Office of Special Affairs, led to the departure of one of South Park's most beloved characters, and it exposed the world to just how bizarre the cult of Scientology really is. When you hear the word cult, you probably think of groups like the Manson family, the People's Temple, or Heaven's Gate. Extreme religious movements led by narcissistic individuals, which often end in complete tragedy. Scientology follows a similar formula, exerting control over vulnerable people, but its primary goal isn't spiritual salvation, it's money. Scientology exists for the sole purpose of recruiting members and then controlling every aspect of their lives as a way to extract the maximum amount of wealth from them. Today, I'll be breaking down this beautiful piece of media while hopefully teaching you something about this notorious cult. Though we should first start with the question, what is Scientology and where did it come from? So originally, I was only going to break down South Park's episode, but the more I went down this rabbit hole, the more I became obsessed learning about the history of Scientology and its founder. Did you know Scientology carried out one of the largest infiltrations of the US government in history? Did you know its founder participated in rituals in an attempt to summon a moonchild? It's one of the most bizarre topics I've ever researched, so I'm going to break it down as much as I can. I'll chapter the video so you can skip straight to the South Park stuff if that's what you're here for, but for those of you who want a full picture of this insane story, let's jump right into it with part 1. Our story begins with a man named L. Ron Hubbard. Born in 1911, he was the only child of Harry Ross Hubbard and Ladora Mae Waterbury. His father was a U.S. Navy officer and his mother, a school teacher. The early life of L. Ron was fairly ordinary. He struggled in school and moved frequently due to his father's naval deployments. There was one thing, however, that set him apart from other kids his age: his imagination. Ever since he was a child, he was drawn to storytelling, often writing fictional tales and dreaming of travel and adventure. He especially enjoyed stories about science fiction, a passion that will become very relevant later in this video. At the age of 22, he got married and would go on to have kids. This is when he realized he needed to make some money. Around this time, he began a career as a hack writer. This is basically someone with no real literary skill, but could write an interesting enough story that people would actually pay for. He continued with this career until 1941, where he decided to follow in his father's footsteps and join World War II as a naval officer. His naval career is highly disputed. Hubbard would claim he was blinded, crippled, a war hero who miraculously healed himself using his mind and spirit. So he was already showing signs of a cult leader before Scientology. Something about his naval career that actually can be proven is that he was removed from command of at least 2 ships. It was alleged that he was unable to work with others and had an overly bloated sense of himself. He would also call for fire way too quickly. There's even a recorded incident where he mistakenly shelled Mexican territory. He also spent a ridiculous amount of time in the hospital during World War II, complaining of ulcers and his eyesight, despite never coming into contact with the Japanese. Obviously, it can't be proven, but it's suspected that he was milking injuries so he could avoid major combat operations once the war progressed. Despite this, Scientologists believe he was a decorated war hero who helped the USA win the war against Japan. In reality, he was a Nepo baby who was promoted due to his father's war history and only ever patrolled Allied zones, while spending more time in the hospital with ulcers than people who were missing limbs. After the war, Hubbard's life started to get very strange and chaotic. He abandoned his first wife and 2 children, preferring to spend a year drifting while writing short stories to survive. It's around this time where he found himself deeply fascinated with occult ideas. This is when he met Jack Parsons and his girlfriend Sarah Northrop. Parsons was a rocket engineer and chemist who today is actually credited as an important figure in the history of the US space program. Oh yeah, he was also an occultist. If you aren't familiar, an occultist is someone who believes there are hidden forces in the universe that most people can't see or understand, and with the right knowledge, these forces can be accessed, controlled, or used for power, enlightenment, and personal gain. So L. Ron moves in with Parsons and his girlfriend. They perform rituals together, believe in magic, and try to manifest wealth and power through sex magic. Yes, you heard that right. This is something Scientology completely ignores, but it's extremely well documented. So L. Ron and Parsons basically became best bros. Parsons even put Hubbard in charge of his finances and business affairs. Around this time, L. Ron convinced him they would make a fortune buying boats on the East Coast and selling them in California for profit. Parsons expected this to be a foolproof investment opportunity. What happened next is that L. Ron Hubbard took control of all of the money, withdrew the funds for himself, and ran off with Parsons' girlfriend. There's backstabbing, and then there's whatever the hell this is. Imagine getting your life savings taken and your girl by the same guy. It's unclear whether L. Ron was truly an occultist or if he pretended to be because he knew he could take advantage of the mentally insane Parsons. Jack Parsons would pass away a few years later in a laboratory accident. Some people question the accident part, but it can never be proven either way. The life of Jack Parsons is insanely fascinating, and I can't do his whole story justice in this video. Atrocity Guide has probably the best documentary on him if you're interested in learning more. But let's get back to L. Ron, who would go on to marry Sarah Northrup, and yes, L. Ron was still legally married to his first wife at the time. Cute, absolute rock star. So now we're getting to where the birth of Scientology really begins. Around 1948, Hubbard moved out of California to Georgia with his new wife. He struggled financially and mentally around this time, and this is when he decided to get psychiatric care. Hubbard was completely dissatisfied with this process. He believed that mainstream psychology wasn't actually helping people and that he had a better theory to cure psychological issues. In 1950, Hubbard introduced a set of pseudoscientific ideas called Dianetics, marketed as a form of psychological treatment. The book sold very well, but when it came to actually putting Dianetics into practice, it failed miserably. It was dismissed by the psychological community as ineffective nonsense. The organizations he started to sell Dianetics eventually went bankrupt. Ironically enough, this bankruptcy is exactly what would lead to the birth of Scientology. Instead of pretending that Dianetics was some scientific breakthrough, he rebranded it as something spiritual. After all, religion has protections that science doesn't. The Church of Scientology was officially founded in 1953. I'll explain more about Dianetics and Scientology's core beliefs during the episode analysis, but for now, let's talk about what led South Park to actually making this episode happen. As every South Park fan knows, Trey Parker and Matt Stone aren't afraid to call out anything. Whether it's a celebrity, an entire religion, or even the US government, these guys undeniably have balls of steel. Scientology is a topic they wanted to cover pretty much since the show began.
We wanted to do a Scientology episode since the show started. Mostly because Scientology is just funny.
The average person around this time didn't know all that much about Scientology. Unless you lived in a major city like LA, New York, or Clearwater, you likely never heard of it until this episode released. The church claims at its peak they had millions of followers. In reality, the number was closer to 150,000. Still a very massive following when you consider this is a literal cult, but if you compare it to actual religions, it's almost nothing. Another reason the general public wasn't too aware of Scientology is because they became very good at manipulation and silencing its critics. They became known for suing anyone who spoke out against them, and they even had an aggressive tactic of silencing people called fair game.
It basically says that you can do anything to a critic or an enemy of Scientology and not be subjected to any form of Scientology justice.
People were scared to even make jokes about the church, which is why I will forever glaze Trey Parker and Matt Stone for having the balls to call them out, knowing full well that they could and probably would be targeted.
In Hollywood at that time, Scientology was just simply a no-go. The lawyers would just say no. And whether they said, look, you're right, this should be completely up for parody, we don't want to risk it.
It's funny that the release of this episode ended up being one of South Park's biggest controversies, despite 99% of the viewers agreeing with the message. That should give you a pretty good idea on just how powerful Scientology was at the time. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video for a full breakdown of what happened after this episode aired, including the misunderstood story of Isaac Hayes, the crash out of Tom Cruise, among other things. So now that we have a basic understanding of how Scientology was founded and what led led South Park to finally making this episode happen, I think we're ready to break it down. First, I'd like to give a shout out to Blooms, who covered this episode almost 2 years ago now. He's always shouting me out whenever he makes a video on a topic that I've already covered, even though he totally doesn't have to, just showing some appreciation for the GOAT. With that being said, let's get into our analysis. Here is South Park's famous episode, Trapped in the Closet.
Dad, Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet.
The episode begins with the boys leaving a local card shop. They're having a good time ripping packs when Kyle asks Stan why he didn't get anything. Stan explains that he's trying to save money to get a bike. Cartman laughs this off and they all start plotting on what they should do next. They come up with the idea of playing laser tag, but Stan says he only wants to do something that's free.
Stan, don't you know the first law of physics? Anything that's fun costs at least $8. Well, I can't spend any money. Okay, be a Jew. We're gonna go play laser tag.
I guess we're just not gonna ask how Kenny has money to buy sports cards and play laser tag. So the boys ditch him and Stan goes off on his own. He happens to walk by two people who claim to be giving out free personality tests. The lady asks him if he's ever heard of Scientology. She tells us it's based on the book Dianetics and adds that many cool people are Scientologists like Tom Cruise and John Travolta. By the way, this episode is over 20 years old and both of these guys are still involved with Scientology. They are either completely insane or Scientology has some dirt on them. We'll talk more about them later, of course. So Stan ends up following the woman inside where he meets Brian, who is going to get him started on his personality test. In Scientology, these people are called field staff members. It's their job to get as many people possible to take these personality tests and to get them interested in the church. The only way for these people to make any money is if they successfully get someone to sign up for courses. It's not uncommon for these people to make less than $100 a week. If you happen to be good at recruitment, you can be moved up and promoted to something better though. So not only is Scientology a cult, it's basically a pyramid scheme too. Stan asks them if this is a religion because he's pretty sure his family is Catholic.
Scientology is more of an alternative to psychology than a religion.
Then how come that sign says Church of Scientology?
The staff member quickly tries to change the subject, of course, doing his best not to scare Stan away. So Brian takes him into the room to start the personality test and starts asking Stan some very vague questions.
Do you ever whistle just for the fun of it?
These personality tests rely heavily on the Barnum effect. This is when people start to believe that generic questions are personally meaningful, even though they can apply to anyone. Of course, the show is making the questions as stupid as possible for comedic effect, but the real questions Scientologists ask are vague just like this. The best example of the Barnum effect is horoscopes. People will read theirs and think, wow, that's so relatable and applies to me. Well, yeah, that's because they're generic and vague and could apply to anyone. So the test finally ends and Stan asks how he did.
Well, I hate to tell you this, Stan, but you are one messed up kid.
Huh?
Stan is horrified by what he hears and had no idea he was depressed, and when he asks how he can fix this, he's told he just needs $240. So the average person would hear this, laugh it off, and leave without thinking. What you have to remember is that what Scientology does is prey on vulnerable people. If you don't seem vulnerable, they will attempt to coerce you into believing that you need them. That's the strategy they're using with Stan here. Some people, however, are completely depressed and looking for answers. This makes them a prime target for literally every cult in history. In the next scene, we see Stan eating dinner with his family. He tells them that he's totally depressed. Sharon tries to ask him some questions on why he's depressed, but Stan can't give them a real answer. He just knows that he needs $240. So Stan begs his dad to give him the money, but Randy tells him to use some of his own money that he's been saving for that bike. Stan is hesitant because, of course, that's his own money, and Randy gives us one of his funnier lines in the series.
You want a bike, or do you want to not be depressed?
So Stan goes back to the Scientology Center and gives up his life savings. A staff member then takes him on a tour and begins explaining Scientology, starting with an introduction to L. Ron Hubbard.
Mr. Hubbard discovered that negative emotions are actually caused by things called body thetans.
What the field staff member won't tell you is that Hubbard claimed these body thetans are actually the souls of ancient aliens who died in a cosmic catastrophe 75 million years ago, because most people would probably walk out of the building after hearing that. So just for clarity, it's actually pronounced Thetan. Considering I've seen this episode like 30 times, I just pronounce it Thetan because South Park does. The staff member goes on to tell us that to get rid of these body Thetans, they use a tool called an e-meter, and a process called auditing, with the idea that talking through personal traumas and life experiences can free you from these negative emotions, or body Thetans. So Stan follows her into the auditing room, and she tells him to hold on to the e-meter so she can test his Thetan levels. The history of the e-meter is pretty funny. It was invented in the 1940s by Volney Matheson and measures the skin's electrical resistance reacting to stress or emotion. Basically a glorified lie detector. L. Ron discovered it during his Dianetics era and turned it into the main tool of Scientology. They treat it like some sort of religious artifact when in reality L. Ron had nothing to do with its creation and wasn't given the full rights to it until 15 years after Scientology was born. So the staff member starts measuring Stan's Thetan levels and notices something is off, so she calls over Brian to double check it. It cuts to Brian in a panic going to one of his co-workers who's talking to Mr. Mackey of all people. We learn that Stan's Thetan levels are ridiculously high.
Fax these results to the head office in Los Angeles. The president has to see this right away.
It cuts to the higher-ups of Scientology who are all reviewing Stan's test results. One member asks how it's even possible for a first-timer to have that kind of Thetan level.
He registered OT9. I'm only OT7 and I've been in the church all my life.
So they don't explain this in the episode, but OT means operating Thetan, which represents a state of spiritual advancement. These are essentially ranks within Scientology that can only be advanced through, wanna take a guess? That's right, money. From being able to do basic solo auditing at OT1 to unlocking the full secrets of L. Ron Hubbard at OT8. Yeah, it's basically a bunch of made up crap to squeeze more wealth out of their members, but they don't call it official ranks. They frame it as spiritual levels, which you end up having to pay for. Insane. So the president of Scientology mentions that he's been waiting for this day for over 42 years. Side note, although there is no title of president in Scientology, there is a leader who is named David Miscavige. His official title is called Chairman of the Religious Technology Center. South Park probably avoided giving this character a name or making him look too similar, likely to avoid legal trouble. That's just my best guess. Oh yeah, one of the craziest things about David Miscavige is that his wife hasn't been publicly seen since 2007. People have even filed missing persons reports for her, but LAPD just dismisses them. Even if there's no foul play, this is still one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard. If she was fine, wouldn't she at least prove to the public so people don't assume the worst? She could actually just be locked in a dungeon somewhere or worse. Like, people should be talking about this more.
Shelley Miscavige being missing is literally like suddenly Prince Philip shows up and there's no queen.
I could make an entire video about David Miscavige. He has so many allegations against him, but we should probably get back to the episode. So the chairman goes on to say that the only person to ever register OT9 in the history of the church was L. Ron Hubbard himself, thus declaring Stan the reincarnation of Hubbard and Scientology's new prophet. And yes, reincarnation is a core belief within Scientology. There's actually been a lot of people over the years who have claimed to be the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard, which I find pretty funny. In the next scene, Stan is back at home, heading outside to take out the trash. When he opens the front door, he's greeted by Scientology members.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful.
The chairman comes out from his private jet and introduces himself to Stan. Randy demands to know what the hell is going on, and he's told that his son is the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. Randy, for once, is being a good parent, telling them he doesn't want his son to join their group.
We're not asking him to join us. We're asking him to lead us.
The conversation is interrupted when Shelley notices that John Travolta is in the crowd. The head of Scientology quickly uses this as manipulation to convince the Marshes that this is a legitimate opportunity. I mean, if Tom Cruise and John Travolta are Scientologists, why wouldn't you be? It's a lot easier to sell a cult when you've got A-list celebrities as your walking advertisements.
You know, without it, I wouldn't be where I am. Yeah. You know, so it's a beautiful religion, and I'm very proud.
Scientology might be completely insane, but they were pretty smart in their marketing, you have to give it to them. So Randy sends Stan up to his room where we finally get to see Tom Cruise. Tom is in full fanboy mode, fully believing that Stan is the reincarnation of L. Ron, and he asks him if he's done a good job.
You're not Gene Hackman or that guy that played Napoleon Dynamite, but you're okay.
This answer sends Cruise into a full-blown breakdown, where he proceeds to trap himself in the closet. Okay, I don't think anyone needs this joke explained to them, but the reason Matt and Trey did this is because they wanted to directly call Tom Cruise gay as a joke, but their lawyers wouldn't let him do it.
And actually the joke was just, okay, we're going to have Tom Cruise show up, and he's flamboyantly gay and whatever. Like, yeah, but you can't say he's gay. And it's like, okay, but we can say he's like closeted gay. And like, no, you really can't say that either. And we're like, and then it just became this thing of like, what if he's literally in a closet? And they're like, yeah, you can do that.
Tom refuses to come out of the closet, so Stan calls his dad.
Dad! Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet!
Outside, there's a news report that is covering what's happening with Tom Cruise. Suddenly, the famous singer-songwriter R. Kelly gives us an interview.
And so I pull out my gun. Tell me why Tom Cruise in the closet or else I'm gonna shoot someone.
So the title of this episode is called Trapped in the Closet. It works perfectly with the Tom Cruise joke, but this is actually the name of a musical soap opera created by R. Kelly. I always thought the "and I pull out my gun" line was something Matt and Trey just made up, but it's actually similar to a line R. Kelly says in his series. R. Kelly has had serious allegations against him since the 90s. The dude got caught before he could ever get an invite to the Epstein Island, but thankfully he's in federal prison now. So the head of Scientology gets the Marshes to sit down so he can fully explain why Stan is the reincarnation of L. Ron.
Wasn't L. Ron Hubbard a science fiction writer?
Yes, Randy, he was. Not only that, L. Ron holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most published works by one author. This man was the definition of quantity over quality. Even before Scientology, he was never seen as a respected author. He pumped out hundreds of sci-fi and Western stories like they were nothing. Out of the 1,000 books he wrote, he had maybe 3 that were recognized as above average: Typewriter in the Sky, Final Blackout, and Battlefield Earth, and even these are debatable as being above average. So the head of Scientology tells them that Stan is undoubtedly the prophet and that he needs to hear the great secret doctrine of life behind Scientology. Stan agrees to listen, but of course his parents get kicked out of the room, and then we get the most iconic part of the episode. This is one of those times I wish I could just play the full 2-minute clip, but, you know, Paramount would nuke my video, so I'll do my best.
There is a reason for people feeling sad and depressed. An alien reason.
He tells us that it began over 75 million years ago. There was a galactic federation of planets which was ruled over by the evil Lord Xenu. He tells us that Xenu thought his galaxy was overpopulated, so he rounded up countless aliens and had them frozen. This little caption here is one of the funniest things South Park has ever done. These frozen aliens were eventually taken to planet Earth to have them dumped into the volcanoes of Hawaii, killing them.
The souls of those aliens, however, lived on and all floated up towards the sky. Xenu didn't want their souls to return, and so he built giant soul catchers in the sky.
The souls were then forced to watch brainwashing material which tricked them into a false reality. After the souls were released, they were free to roam the Earth until the dawn of humanity, where they found bodies to latch onto.
Which still to this day causes all our fears, our confusions, and our problems.
So you're probably wondering how anyone could hear this and actually believe it. Well, to learn the story of Xenu, you have to at least be OT level 3, which, remember, costs a lot of money in dedication. We're talking years of your life and $50,000 to $100,000. And South Park just told it to us for free. By the time you're this deep in the cult, you're already fully invested and will take anything L. Ron Hubbard says as gospel. If you were one of the smart people and realized this was all bullshit and tried to leave, well, Scientology would declare you an enemy of the church. Not only that, they basically force you to abandon any family member who leaves the church as well. They will threaten you legally if you give away their secrets, they will use intimidation tactics, launch investigations to try and find dirt on you. It's genuinely insane how much they've gotten away with over the years. So the head of Scientology tells Stan that all he has to do is pick up where L. Ron Hubbard left off, to continue writing the story of Scientology. Stan, of course, has no idea what to write, so they tell him to do what L. Ron Hubbard did. Close his eyes and write whatever came to his mind, which sounds exactly like what L. Ron Hubbard did. So we get another scene of Tom Cruise refusing to come out of the closet. They use Nicole Kidman in this scene, who was actually married to Tom Cruise, if you didn't know that. She left the church after their divorce, so respect to her, but she still refused to give details about her time in Scientology, but I don't know if you can blame her for that. She was probably terrified. Another theory is that she had a settlement with Tom Cruise during her divorce where she wasn't allowed to talk about Scientology.
I think primarily it's because of whatever agreement was made in their divorce would include not speaking publicly about Scientology.
Cartman, Kyle, and Kenny show up to ask Stan if he wants to go to the movies. They show concern, and Kyle even mentions how this is basically a cult. Stan is fully invested in defending Scientology and L. Ron at this point, which is hilarious.
Dude, L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. He lived on a boat with only young boys and got busted by the feds numerous times. I did not.
Hubbard spent a lot of his later life on his boat named the Apollo. He would have people call him Commodore and gave them full-on naval uniforms. For a guy who got fired during World War II for chasing non-existent submarines and shelling Mexican territory, he had a lot of pride in his naval background. This organization is called the Sea Org, and yeah, it still exists today. The Sea Org is basically Scientology's elites or royalty. They're the senior-most management and have a dedicated staff of people who signed a billion-year pledge. Like I said earlier, they believe in reincarnation, and the people who sign this contract are pledging to give eternal dedication to Scientology. Absolutely insane. Some of the people that were actually able to leave have filed lawsuits alleging many different kinds of abuse. Hubbard likely spent his time in the ocean because there are few laws in international waters. So Stan tells them if they can't accept that he's now a part of Scientology, that they're no longer friends.
Dan, I just want you to know that I still hate Kyle more than you.
This scene is actually pretty sad, but Cartman just fixes everything. Meanwhile, they try and use John Travolta to get Tom Cruise to come out, which backfires because Travolta feels very safe and comfortable in the closet.
Please, Tom Cruise and John Travolta, come out of the closet. And I pull out my gun. Oh, Jesus, here we go with the gun again.
You guys really need to watch R. Kelly's Trapped in the Closet if you haven't, because I swear this is a really good parody. Meanwhile, Stan shows some of his writings to the chairman, who praises him on how good it is, until Stan reveals his most recent writing.
I wrote that all the Scientologists should no longer have to pay money to belong.
What are you, stupid? Then how do we make money from those people?
Stan has the innocent thought that it's not about the money, it's about the message. This is when the chairman goes fully mask off. He exposes that his followers are stupid enough to believe this crap, but really, it's all a global scheme to make as much money as possible. The chairman tells Stan to lock in and not miss this opportunity because together they can make $3 million. So Stan agrees to keep writing. This scene perfectly calls out the higher ups of Scientology. I don't buy that any of them actually believe this Xenu crap. David Miscavige is not a moron, he's a con man, just like L. Ron Hubbard was. Dianetics was created to scam people into believing that it was some new mental health breakthrough. Once that failed, L. Ron pivoted to turn it spiritual. The critics at the time could no longer discredit him because, well, then you're mocking a religion. To make it even sweeter, religions can be granted tax-exempt status. You might be wondering how Scientology even got this status. Well, allow me to explain. Actually, for a long time, the IRS did go after Scientology, claiming it was fraud only to benefit L. Ron Hubbard. This led to the famous Operation Snow White. This operation was a huge sabotage campaign by the Church of Scientology in the 1970s. It was a secret plan to steal, delete, and change government records about Scientology that the church didn't like. They sent secret agents to break into government offices, steal documents, and destroy or alter files that were critical of them. In 1977, the FBI finally raided them, and 11 high-ranking Scientologists were convicted, including L. Ron Hubbard's third wife, who actually went to prison. So what happened to Hubbard then? Well, he avoided trial by going into hiding. He had full-time security and a team dedicated to keeping him safe until he eventually passed away to illness. Knowing all of this, how is it possible that in the year 2026, Scientology is still tax exempt? After L. Ron died, the IRS and Scientology had been fighting for over 25 years by this point, but in 1993, the IRS finally gave in. Scientology paid them out and promised to never battle with them again. In return, the IRS allowed them to be a tax-exempt religion. So apparently, if you have enough money and lawyers, you can even buy out the IRS. Crazy world we live in. Let's get back to the episode. So the police use their last resort to get Cruise and Travolta out of the closet, R. Kelly, who of course enjoys the comfort of the closet as well. Meanwhile, the chairman introduces their new prophet to all of the Scientologists, and Stan starts reading off some of the writings. During his speech, he starts to feel guilty and decides to come clean.
I'm not the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. And Scientology is just a big fat global scam.
Oh, we are gonna sue you!
It's a smart little detail how they used Brian for this line. For the most part, he was overwhelmingly nice throughout this episode, showing how aggressive Scientologists can be whenever they face criticism. Cruise, Travolta, and R. Kelly finally leave the closet after hearing what Stan said. Giving R. Kelly this expression is hilarious. Some weird stuff definitely went down in that closet. Stan shows us that he's not scared of being sued.
I'm not scared of you! Sue sue me!
This is basically a meta joke of Matt and Trey standing on business, letting Scientology know that they are not scared to be sued. The episode ends with all of the credits being named John Smith or Jane Smith. Some people think the credits stop them from actually being sued by Scientology, but the reality is that Matt and Trey just did this as another joke. Scientology had no real grounds to actually sue them. This is normally when I would start an outro, but we still have a few things to talk about. Let's get into the aftermath of this episode. So Scientology had no real grounds to sue Matt and Trey. The episode did end up getting pulled at some point though. Not because of some legal battle with Scientology, it was because of Tom Cruise. He was so offended by the episode that he threatened to pull his press tour for Mission Impossible 3. Keep in mind, Comedy Central is part of Viacom, which also owns Paramount Pictures.
And then we got a call on Wednesday morning of the Scientology episode was not going to air because of some producers of Mission Impossible 3 that didn't want it to air.
They said, because they called us and they said, listen, guys, we need to tell you we're going to pull this episode because certain people involved with Mission Impossible 3 want it pulled off. So we're going to pull it off, but we just don't want you to say anything to anybody. And
So a rerun got pulled, but that's about all Scientology managed to accomplish. They did, however, do something a lot more sinister than start a legal battle. Scientology's Office of Special Affairs sent private investigators to look into Matt and Trey. This included spying on them, attempting to reach out to people who knew them for any emails, text messages, desperately looking for anything they could use as blackmail. Turns out Matt and Trey didn't have anything to hide. Probably my favorite thing about the aftermath of this episode is the story of Jenna Miscavige. She is the niece of current Scientology leader David Miscavige. She learned about the story of Xenu through this South Park episode.
Yeah,
eventually
it did. From South Park.
From South Park.
Yeah, that's where I learned about it.
Her family had purposely kept her off the internet for almost her entire life. She eventually went on a mission trip to Australia where she saw the South Park episode and immediately started researching the history of Scientology. She and her husband immediately left the church after doing their own research and became outspoken critics, exposing all of the abuse and control inside Scientology. So not only did South Park expose Scientology to the world, it also caused thousands of people, including the chairman's own niece, to leave the church. That's how powerful this episode was. I guess we're ready to talk about the most painful part of this episode, the misunderstood story of Isaac Hayes. Hayes was the voice of one of South Park's most iconic characters, Chef, who unfortunately was a Scientologist. After South Park released this episode, Hayes ended up quitting the show. But it's actually a lot more sad than Hayes simply being offended. You see, Hayes never actually quit the show on his own. Around this time, he suffered a serious stroke that left him unable to speak properly. His son claims he was not capable of writing or approving public statements at the time. Scientology has representatives to handle celebrities, and one of these people quit the show for him, while he was basically bedridden. The worst part is, the fans and even Matt and Trey had no idea about this for years. Most of us just assumed that Isaac Hayes was a big hypocrite, someone who was fine cashing checks, making fun of other religions, but quit the show as soon as his religion was made fun of. We now know that this is not true at all. Sure, it's possible that he might have been offended, but he was never even allowed to talk with Matt and Trey. His health never fully recovered and he passed away a few years later before he could clear the air. His family swears he would never quit the show over Scientology being made fun of. If he did end up making that decision, it would be because he was pressured, threatened, or even blackmailed by the church. South Park would go on to make an episode the next season called The Return of Chef. The theme of this episode is very sad. It's Trey Parker writing about how he was feeling about his friend Isaac and making fun of the fact that he was brainwashed by this fruity little club, obviously referencing Scientology. A great part about this episode though is that they had to use old sound bites whenever Chef had a line. Despite thinking at that time that Isaac Hayes was a big hypocrite, Trey still left a message through the boys that he loved Isaac Hayes and Chef and was sad and hurt that he was brainwashed by Scientology.
Chef, we love you.
Of course, he had to kill him and make him defecate himself. It is South Park after all. Isaac Hayes was a key component to making early South Park successful, and this is just overall a depressing story and should make you hate Scientology that much more. Thankfully, Trapped in the Closet did irreversible damage to Scientology. They don't release official numbers anymore, but it's estimated there are only 10,000 to 30,000 practicing Scientologists right now. Those who are still in the church are likely being blackmailed or receiving benefits and money to stay with the church. They still spend $7 million a year on a Super Bowl ad, which is very annoying to see, but the church is dying off. Hopefully one day it'll be gone for good. This is my most researched video. I honestly might have yapped too much, but like I said earlier, I got really obsessed learning about Scientology, watching hours of documentaries and reading old articles. I hope it was still enjoyable to watch. If you happen to make it this far, liking the video and subscribing would really help me out. As always, thank you guys for watching.